You're listening to the official podcast of the Westside Vineyard in Los Angeles, a community of individuals and families connecting with God to change the world.
So as we kind of invite God to just speak to us and begin to shape us further, let me ask you a question you might reflect on for a moment. How many here would like to be known and recognized as someone who's really judgmental? How many, any, not many hands. It's not something I think in our culture, it's kind of like the ultimate virtue of our day now is like, hey, don't judge anybody. Man, I don't judge anybody. It's like the highest virtue one can hold and have. But often I think we're in tension because so often people say things like, hey man, I don't like to judge anybody. But did you see what that guy did? You know, it like flows right on into judging somebody. And I think we actually live in a unique time, because I think in our current culture we have suddenly made this the ultimate virtue. Like, I don't want to judge, and yet almost every public expression in our culture, whether it be media, commentary, TV, is just absolutely nothing but judgments, just flying, against everything and everyone. Like in a way that 30 years ago, everything was a little more calm, kept objective. Let's not overstate anything. Let's not be jumping to conclude. No, now it's just like the faster and darker and sharper that you can just make judgments, the better you are in a culture that feels like we shouldn't be judgmental. It's just very, very strange. And I think it's because there's a part of us that realizes there's something really insidious about judging inappropriately, but then there's also a part that knows that there needs to be some level of making judgments in a healthy way. And so, I mean, it's wrong to have a critical spirit, but it's okay to have a good critical mind. So like we're stuck in this place. And I think God wants to help speak to us today about what it means to become people who can engage that well, so we can relate well to each other and to other people and become safe people. So as we're going to continue in this series we launched into the summer called Wisdom for Life, in which we're engaging the wisdom that is spoken by God through the book of Proverbs in the scripture, we are engaging this issue. And actually we're kind of engaging some elements right now that are about how we relate to each other. And last week, Marlo spoke about the wisdom to care about your words, because we live in a culture that throws words just flying and free, and we're reminded that words have the what? The power to speak life and really bring life to another, fill them with life, and the power to speak death, to actually speak that which calls almost to the destruction or the demise of another. That's powerful. And wise people are those people who understand that I need to care about my words. And I don't want us to lose that. But also, step back, wise people are those who care about understanding things before moving forward, about seeing things clearly. And that's what we're going to engage today, and how that affects our relationships. And this comes into the wisdom that we find in the 18th chapter of Proverbs. The 18th chapter has like 24 quick statements. Each one is that little proverbial wisdom, but they tend to touch upon this topic. And so we read in Proverbs 18, verse 2, it says, "A fool finds no pleasure in" what? "In understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions." And that word opinions, really at the root of it, the Hebrew word is saying his own heart, his own disposition. In other words, he just likes the way he likes it. And there's kind of the problem. I'm not interested in facts. In fact, let's throw out all of that objective truth. I just want you to know what I like. And we'll just substitute that for reality. And there's a problem with that. When one begins to relate so that all all we want to do is just tell you about, and we all can do that, right? We all just kind of want to share our opinions. We're kind of enamored with them, you know? I mean, like, oh my gosh, you're going to be so amazed by my position on this, my opinion on this. I can't wait. In fact, I can't wait, so I don't even want to hear what you have to say. There's where we can often find ourselves, and this is what comes up in the 13th verse, where it says, "He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame." Wow, some of us, I know I, have found that to be just so true. I think some of the things I regret the most, the things that I feel the most foolish about, were those moments where I realized I jumped ahead and came to conclusions without taking time to understand, and wow, did I miss it. I really thought I was perceiving this person this way or this situation. Why did I land there so quickly, only to discover how off I was and how misguided my actions, my position, my heart, my words were? Wow, the folly and the shame that one can find. Anyone ever found themselves in that moment where you went, whoa, kind of missed that? And he goes on to show the remedy of that. Verse 15, the heart of the discerning, the person who really wants to discern, acquires knowledge. It brings information together. The ears of the wise do what? Seek it out. Pursue it. They go after it. They want to know more, not less. That is not our tendency. We want to know as little as, it takes a lot of work to know more. I just want to know what fits and what works, and then for me, and move on. No, you want to know more, and they seek it out. And that word discerning there, it's describing one who carefully examines all of the facts that are available. Most of us would say, I'm not sure that I'm one who always wants to examine all the facts that are available. But he's saying a wise person will do that. One who's going to walk well in this world. And remember, wisdom is about the way things really are, how they work, and how you can live well, as opposed to knowledge, which is just information, more of a tool. Wisdom is how to actually live and flourish together. And we will become those who help flourish when we become one who cares to gain understanding. And it keeps moving forward. And the verse that I want to focus most on is verse 17, where it then says, the first to present his case seems right, till another comes forward and questions him. All of these concerns for judging, they kind of lead to this basic premise and problem. And that is that we tend to come to conclusions before we have the whole picture clear. And we all probably have done this in one way or another. My goodness, we take it in, we lock it in, and we really don't see it clearly. I want to give you one quick example that you might enjoy.
Come on.
We're going to have our moments. We're going to see some things and go, oh my, we didn't see the whole picture. And now a picture like that, you could clear it up. It's not hard to find and get. It's kind of easy. A few conversation, I missed it. Now I get it. Most of the time, it's a lot more serious, and it involves a lot more of our commitment to be able to do that. Recently, just a few months ago, I got one of those really neat letters in the mail. Maybe you've gotten one. It was a summons for jury duty. Aren't those wonderful? I feel so important. They want me. They want me for a while, too. And And so, go in and anticipate this won't lead to anything, hopefully, and probably, but the end of the first long day comes, and oops, suddenly a bunch of us, like 60, are called into this jury pool to see if we might end up on a jury. And they start into that process, and it's going to go to the whole second day. So we're back for a second day. We go through that whole process. But I'm thinking, my number's way down the line. I'm not going to end up on this jury, And they start dwindling it down until there's one chair left, and I get called onto that jury. So it was the first time I'm actually finding myself, oh my, I'm now serving on this jury. And this would end up going on for some days. Some of you how many of you served on a jury? You've ended up on a jury. Well, a number of you. It's a fascinating experience. And actually, part of us were talking about how there's something kind of special about it. One time, it's a very healthy process, very interesting process, but also relationally, you're hanging out with these people for days that you don't know, and it's just you guys, and you can't talk to anyone else. So you're eating meals together, and we developed a lot of a great relationship. But the thing about this case was that it was so obvious from the beginning that why are we here? This seemed very, very trivial. It's kind of someone who got a little drunk at a bar and acted out in a way that didn't harm anyone, and it just didn't make sense why this had gone to a trial like this, and the amount of resources. The amount of people that were involved, the court system, and now us for days about something that seemed to not be that significant and should have been maybe responded to another way. So that feeling came up. And I remember one night saying to my wife, Leah, I said, gosh, this is going to be a frustrated group. Everybody wants out of here. When this ends and we go to deliberation, everyone's going to be wanting to get out really quickly. I would not want to be the foreman of this jury. So it ends, and they make me the foreman of the jury. And this woman says, oh, I think the pastor should be the foreman. And I'm thinking the whole time, this is literally, this is going to be a conflict. This group is going to be is so frustrated. So I said, okay, well, here's the thing. We're all going to not talk about each other's. First, everyone has 2 minutes to just say what they're thinking, what their first thoughts are. Fascinating. Everyone was frustrated, but everybody said, but I'm conflicted now. This isn't as simple as I want it to be, which was what I was kind of feeling myself and hoping for. And what it brought home to all of us was that this is what they do the entire time they choose juries and give you instructions and send you out. Always they tell you this: can you listen to all the evidence before making a decision? That's the instruction. That's what they question you about when they choose you. It's what the judge sends you out with, and it is what God is bringing home to us today in these very words. Can you hear all the evidence before you come to a conclusion? Now that sounds easy, but it's not. It was hard for us then in that legal formality, and it's hard for us in our personal relationships to do it. It is really hard. So I want us to just note a couple things about the nature of this challenge. And the first of them is this: that open-mindedness, which it's calling us to, it's a vital part of a process, but not the end in itself. What am I trying to get at in that point? Well, what's so clear is that where is this statement of wisdom and how we should live leading to? Is it a call for us to just stay ethereally open-minded, where I just kind of don't believe anything? No. It's calling us to what? Ultimately make a decision. And that is where we have to grasp that this breaks with kind of our cultural narrative, if you will. Because right now as a culture, we love to talk about open-mindedness as an end in itself. So it might be philosophically, hey, you know what? I just don't believe in truth. So I don't believe that we can ever know anything. So I don't claim that there is any truth. For some, that's kind of what they think is a virtue. But this is calling us to be those who make decisions. And for some, it's just that we have conflict with, or we want to avoid conflict. We're just uncomfortable with conflict. So, hey, I don't have an opinion on that. I don't want to make a decision because you might not be comfortable with my decision. You might disagree with my decision. So I don't like to be responsible for making decisions. But you know what? Life includes making decisions. We don't need each other's opinions about everything. And we throw them out far more than we need to. But there are some points in life in which we are responsible to make decisions. God's given us that. Remember, wisdom is about the way life really is. And the way life really is, we all have to make decisions. But I don't know if I'll be right. You're right. You don't. If there's anything I've learned that is involved in being a leader, and I think for anyone, is that at some point we have to make decisions even when we can't be absolutely certain whether we're right. But it's our responsibility. My responsibility involves some decisions that I have to make. They're part of life. The judge didn't say to us in that courtroom, see if you guys have any opinions. But if you don't, that's fine. No, he said you have to make a decision. There has to be a choice. And we're not saying that it's absolutely right. We're just saying we trust this group of people to do their best to make the best decision possible. That's life. And so this is telling us we need to learn how to remain open-minded, always open-minded to a degree, but as people who make decisions. This isn't an invitation to be people who just abdicate basic responsibility in life and just kind of say, well, I don't do that. No, it's staying open as we move towards the necessity of making decisions. And that's an essential part of this. So how do we do it if it's hard? Well, secondly, it reminds us to recognize how first impressions and initial understanding can be misguiding. The very first part of the statement says, the first to present his case seems right. And the point that's being made is we are naturally inclined to be drawn to the first thing that we hear. And that might be for a number of reasons. It might be that the first person who tells us something is the person we may be more naturally emotionally attached to. A friend comes and says, you know what's going on in my relationship with my boss? Let me tell you. Or with my spouse? Let me tell you. And they're our friends, so we feel attached to them, so we just kind of accept their story and we're emotionally connected. Or it might be that the first thing we hear, it's just a lot easier if we just accept it and accept it as true, don't question it, and move on, because it's just easier. The rest is going to involve a little more work. So there's lots of reasons why we might be kind of connected to that. And this and that, but the principle that the judge gave us is you can't just listen to one side. You've got to wait until what? Till it's questioned. You've got to go through that kind of process. And it's true in a legal trial. It's true when people come and share something with us, but it's even true on just the very informal, the things we hardly even realize we're doing when we get impressed by appearances. They call them what? First impressions. First impressions. Most of us would say, yeah, I know, that's a powerful part of life. We get first impressions. Oh, it's much more than that. We're starting to discover how powerful it is, and sometimes to our detriment. You ever heard the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover? It's like old wisdom. It's like the thing, we're tired wisdom. You want to know the truth? You can't. You will always judge a book by its cover. Your nature is almost wired to do it. That's why we have to almost force ourselves. So what seems like old wisdom, we're learning how hard it is. Do you know how fast you form a first impression of somebody? 30 milliseconds. And some argue faster. That's 1/3000th of a second, if I have it right. That is how fast you form. And the amount that you form in that moment, just the visual before you can even think in any logical way, you've taken masses of information. And we're wired to do this. It's fascinating. And we do a pretty good job of it. We somehow bring it all together and we form issues of whether they're trustworthy, good, we'll like them, like that. Just like that. That fast. You don't even have time to think. And you and I are doing it as we cross paths with people all the time. And then as we get to know them more, as we work with them, and all sorts of things. But here's the challenge that comes with it. The other thing we're learning is not only how fast we make judgments and first impressions are striking us and formed in us, they're formed so fast, we're finding out that it's very hard to overcome first impressions. It's very hard. They come quick and they stay with us. They're so fast and we give them so much power. And what happens is out of those, we quickly form like a bias towards somebody. And it might be a bias towards a positive, and it might be a bias negative. And we have what sometimes is phrased as confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means that everything we take in after the moment we form that first impression, we have a tendency to want it to what? To confirm to what we already know. So we kind of keep out information that doesn't fit. So actually, somebody we think is a jerk and they act kindly, we need them to just stay fitting as a jerk. Because now they're acting nice. I don't know, I don't want to deal with that. So I just need them to, or they're very kind, they smile, they're such a warm person, but then they act in a kind of an untrusting manner. Oh, but we'll want to keep that off and pretend that they're very trusting. Why? Because we want to kind of confirm what we've come to believe and keep them in that. Sometimes there's referred to the anchoring bias, which means we've anchored ourselves in something that we took in early on about somebody. And so once we're anchored in that, again, an action they did, some correlation we have to their, maybe their generation, their gender, anything. Once we've anchored our feelings about somebody into that, we tend to not move or not easily move from that. And so we carry this bias and it deeply affects us. And so what does Jesus say to us? In the Gospel of John, Jesus calls out and he says, do not judge by appearances, but rather judge by what is right. He gets it. We are full creatures who like to judge in such an easy and dishonoring and unjust manner that we judge each other by appearance. We think we know so much about each other because of what we've seen. Because we are pretty good, we do know how to, it's amazing how we can pull a lot of information and synthesize it rather quickly, but it's not full and it's not fair. And there we are, and we're trying to relate well to each other. The wise person will realize that they are drawn to first impressions and initial presentations and understandings far too much. And that's why it leads to this third point. We need to recognize also there's a tendency to shape a perspective that is favorable to oneself. Part of what we also realize is that, if the first person is going to share their side of something, or let's say that it's a debate or it's political commentary or it's a personal story, whatever it is the one who's initially presenting likely to be just totally objective? No. Why? Because we all have a bent to present our side of things in a more favorable light. I hope that isn't shocking, and some of us, I know, some of us have an unusual ability, a better ability to be more objective with truth, and some of us have a lot of maybe confidence, self-confidence, so we have more freedom to self-examine ourselves and look at our flaws. But for the most part, we are all self-protective beings. Not one of us in this room is so deeply rooted in God's love that we don't have a part of ourselves that feels vulnerable, rejectable, we're not comfortable with our flaws, so we want to protect ourselves from them. So if we're presenting the way things are in a conflict or with a friend, we're going to present them in a favorable light. If we fail at something and don't do something right, we're going to try to put our spin on it. At least it's a little more comfortable. I know I didn't show up to meet you, but it's because something came up. I didn't return the phone call. My cell phone, it died. We all have a million excuses. We're constantly kind of defending ourselves. We have to admit and recognize that if we're going to do a good job at caring about understanding, we have to presume that the way that we present to others and the way they present to us is going to have a bent towards being favorable. And we're going to need to be able to transcend that at some level. And this is hard because I think at some level, if we're really honest, we can form incredible perceptions and ways of thinking through something in our mind in which we've got it locked down as long as it just stays in our thoughts. So, have conflict with your spouse, conflict with a friend, conflict with a boss. Some of us will develop amazing courtroom scenarios, like we are judge, jury, and lawyer all at once. Like I've got a case that is foolproof, I am so right, my wife is so wrong. I am so right, my boss so that I just run and it gets better and better and better and better and better. As long as it stays in here. Where do I not want to bring it? Out into the open, it might not hold up to examination. Which is why sometimes I've known couples who are like in a lot of pain, deep pain in their marriage or in a friendship. They say, let's get together, let's meet together. And yet there seems to be this reluctance to actually come and meet together. Why? Because the problem may not be quite as simple. They may not look quite as good as the way they present it solo if everybody and all the information is brought together. We have to become courageous people to be willing to follow this way of wisdom that says you've got to bring things out. You've got to open yourself up to things. Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man, what? Listens to counsel, allows there to be a larger look at things, because it's worth it. It's worth it to gain understanding, even if it doesn't leave you feeling better. Or Proverbs 21:2 says, all a man's ways seem right to him, speaking of men only, but that's just to be safe. But the Lord weighs the heart. The Lord sees more. So why are we trying to make ourselves look so ideal and demand and declare our sense of always being right when the Lord knows differently? We've got to have a trust in God's grace and kind of come out and say, I don't know, this is the way I see it, but I'm open to seeing more. I'm open to the scrutiny for the sake of understanding. Understanding is worth it. The bigger picture, if it gets clear, I might not like your version, but my version's probably not perfect. And it's just worth trying to seek what is the larger truth, what is more full and more fair. And so we come to the last point here, which is that wisdom will patiently allow the opportunity to challenge an initial perspective. As the verse concludes, it begins by saying the first to present his case seems right, but then it says what? Till another comes forward and questions him. Such a simple statement. It's like saying, yeah, everything seems right when you only have one part, but you really, truth will become most clear when we allow it to be given a more full examination, where we can get clear that maybe that's not entirely true. Maybe you misjudged this. Maybe there's some things you're bringing to the table. Oh, no, that's not possible. Yes, it's possible. Maybe you're part of the problem too when somebody else gets to speak. But that is the only way that it says we can come forward. And it bears an enormous truth. This defines really what God sowed into Israel, into the whole of their way of being his people and seeking justice. The law of Israel declared that nothing would be decided by one witness alone. It would always require two or more witnesses, because God understands that if you want understanding, you need that. We're beings who need that. God alone is omnipotent, and God judges by seeing everything. That's something we can't do. So what do we need to do? Be people who are willing to get the bigger picture. So God shapes that into him. And Western justice is written with this in mind, with this very truth coming to the forefront. And most of us in this room would say, I'm glad for that. I'm glad someone can't sit there and send me to prison just based on their own opinion or based on their version. I'm glad it takes some scrutiny of what is true, aren't you? What's amazing is we deeply value this in the legal system, and yet we deeply violate it on a personal level. We are making judgments about each other all the time and actually do a lot to ignore the other side of a story. And what God is saying is, I want you to learn to be people who are safe, that other people feel safe because they know that you will not judge just by first impressions, just by your own heart and your own disposition. You won't judge just by the ease of just taking things quickly. You will be willing to pursue understanding in all matters. That's what helps make someone safe. And God is calling us out to become those kind of people. And what does it take? Patience, a little bit of patience to start with. You have to be willing to say, I don't know everything yet. It'd be easy just to kind of summarize and lock in my opinion, my conclusion. But I need to be open. I need to be willing to be one who seeks to discern what that truth really is. Otherwise, we're going to judge someone before we know the whole story. And we're going to think, well, I'm so smart. I'm just amazingly smart. I figure people out in 1 second, and I'm always right. No, we're not. We're amazing. We do have amazing capabilities, what our brains do to take a lot of information, but we are not always right. Part of what happens when we do it is that we are just trying to expedite life at other people's expense. We think we know each other in this room. If there's anything I've learned, it's how little I really understand most of the people I think I know. One thing I have found, and I've shared this with a few people over the last few years, but I am finding more and more that, we meet people at a certain point in life, so we know them. But when I finally find out more, which isn't often, about someone's real story, I'm in awe how they even got here. I'm amazed that some of you have what you've risen through just to be functioning in life, given some of what's in your story. But when I don't know that, I'm just judging how I might experience you, and I don't even appreciate what makes you up, what you're reacting to in life. We do not know each other that well. We're amazed. We're amazing at what we do in terms of assessing a lot of information, but we see so little of what another person is really about and understanding why they do what they do. I don't even understand half of why I do what I do, and yet I'm quick to kind of presume and project that onto others. We need to stop and say, God, help me become a person, lead me in the wisdom of becoming a person who cares more about two things in particular. From last week, who cares about my words? Because we live in a world that's like, whatever, just throw them around. They're cheap. They're not cheap. They're not cheap at all. And it's defining who we are to other people, the way we treat and relate and care about our words. But also, underneath words, I think, is understanding. Because the way we throw words around, it relates to how we understand who someone is and what the real situation is. So if we don't care about understanding, our words become more frivolous. We need to care about words, but also understanding, taking the time, becoming patient, saying, I'm willing to hear more. In fact, I need to hear more. So I want to invite you this morning to join me in opening ourselves up to just, God, help look through my life and help me to think, what kind of person am I becoming when it comes to becoming safe, when it comes to be caring of words and caring of understanding? Because other people, friends and parents and family and friends and kids are all going to be shaped and affected by whether I'm one who's quick to jump to conclusions or is open in these ways. So I want to invite you to join me in just putting these before God, and I'm just going to give us some time, a few minutes, just quietly, just to invite God, who I believe cares about us, who I believe wisdom is calling out from him, even now. And these three questions put on the screen. One, is there someone in my life in which I have not been caring about my words and spoken harm rather than life? And secondly, am I tending to allow first impressions that fit my bias more than seeking greater understanding? Maybe there's something that you correlate. It's the way you feel about another gender, another age, another race, another disposition, the way somebody looks, something that has caused you to kind of keep some people out. And thirdly, is there someone in my life in which I have judged without seeking a more complete understanding? Lord, we just come before you and take this moment to invite your Spirit now to search our hearts. We come as people who are who don't probably realize how little we fully grasp and how we can become quite unsafe. And we invite your Spirit to search not just our hearts but our lives and show us where there may be people where we might need to change postures and to seek you for healing. And I just invite you just to pray in your own heart, confess what comes to mind, ask for God's leading in your own life in any way that even now he brings forward. Get a sense that some of us realize that we've kind of been playing judge and jury to somebody in our life. And maybe we need to just step down as judge and step down as jury and just become one of the people that's presenting their case. I also sense there may be some here who you've become really estranged. You've kind of almost written somebody out of your life, or you have felt written out of their life because of something that seems to have become definitive, a conclusion reached that needs to be open to a greater understanding. I sense, I don't know if this is from the Lord, but the impression I have is that somebody in the back, this may relate to your mother, that you feel estranged from, like really broken off from. Lord, we invite you to lead us now in the way of wisdom, that we might walk well, that we might be those who you've entrusted to be those who are decision makers, who must imperfectly, but also to do so faithfully and justly and thoughtfully. Forgive us for the ways that we have judged or been wrong in our heart. We offer you our own confession. Let's stand and let's sing together.
Thank you for listening to the official broadcast of the Westside Vineyard in Los Angeles. Tune in for next week's message.